Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Amputee Coalition's Virtual Advocacy Forum. We are so grateful that you're here with us today. These are unprecedented times, and we are all learning to do things in a whole new way, including this forum. So we really hope we can be together in person in Washington, D.C. next year. My name is Carol Bleimeyer, and I'm here to help you navigate this new online environment. Over the next 3 days, as we learn from the Amputee Coalition's leaders and outside experts and government officials about our policy priorities in 2020, especially in the context of COVID-19. Before we get started, let me take a moment to walk through some of the logistics of our session today and over the next few days. I want to remind everyone that these sessions are being recorded and they will be available on the Amputee Coalition's website. If you have questions for the presenters at any point during our session, you can type them into the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen. I'll be here to help you and our speakers work through your questions, and we'll do our very best to answer as many questions as possible throughout the day and at the end of the session. And you might hear us use some terms today that you haven't heard before. So if you check the handouts section of your dashboard, you'll see that we've included a glossary of terms, some commonly used words when we talk about public policy. So we hope that will be helpful for you as we navigate this session today. If you see any blips or lags in video, please know that we do have producers working behind the scenes to help us fix that, since we're all broadcasting from remote locations. This virtual setting means that we'll have a lot of new ways to participate in advocacy throughout the year. So if you find these sessions valuable, please share them with your friends and your entire network. Now, I'd like to introduce the expert speakers who will be leading the Advocacy Forum. From the Amputee Coalition, we have Mary Richards. Mary is the Amputee Coalition's president and CEO. Before joining the Amputee Coalition, Mary was the executive director of Partners for Better Care. She was the founding executive director of the Alzheimer's Impact Movement, and she was the deputy CEO of the Parkinson's Action Network. She also worked in the U.S. House of Representatives for two members of the House as their senior health policy staffer. With Mary is Dan Ignazuski. He is the Amputee Coalition's Chief Policy and Programs Officer. Dan oversees government relations, support and outreach, and education and research for the Amputee Coalition. He also serves as the principal investigator for the Amputee Coalition's cooperative agreement with the Administration for Community Living that operates the National Limb Loss Resource Center. Also joining us today from Matthew Zablud from the Beekeeper Group. He's going to talk about how advocates can represent their community and get engaged. Matthew is a founding partner of the Beekeeper Group, and he previously worked at the national headquarters of the Bush-Cheney 2004 presidential campaign. Prior to that, he was a lawyer and campaign manager in Australia. Tomorrow, we'll hear from Raisa Downs, who will tell us about the current political landscape on Capitol Hill. She is one of the founders of the firm Tarplin, Downs & Young. She used to serve as the subcommittee staff director and healthcare policy advisor on the Senate HELP Committee. She also served as the principal deputy assistant for legislation at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Finally, on Tuesday, we will hear from Laura Truman. Laura is the Director of Office of Intergovernmental and External Affairs at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, also known as HHS. Previously, Laura served as a senior policy advisor to the House Majority Whip and as legislative director for a U.S. Senator. She also has worked at the Heritage Foundation, United Health, and the Coalition for Affordable Health Coverage. Now, I'd like to turn it over and welcome Mary Richards, the Amputee Coalition CEO. She's going to kick off today's virtual advocacy forum, and she'll tell us more about what we'll all be learning about today, tomorrow, and Tuesday. Mary, take it away.
Thank you so much, Carol, and thank you to all of you who are joining us today from across the country. It means so much to us that you're participating virtually. To get us started, I want to share a little bit about who we are and what we hope to get out of this event. As many of you know, the Amputee Coalition is community-focused and community-driven. Your passion is what drives us, and you are the expert in living with limb loss. We know that your voice matters. During the next 2 days, we hope to give you the tools that you need to use your voice effectively to improve the lives of people living with limb loss. We'll learn about advocacy and how to advocate. We'll learn about policy issues, and we'll learn about how to tell your story to both inform and educate your members of Congress and to make a compelling case to support policy requests critical to people living with limb loss. The Amputee Coalition's mission is to reach out to and empower people affected by limb loss to achieve their full potential through education, support, and advocacy to promote limb loss prevention. We have unparalleled education and support programs, and we want to elevate advocacy as a priority in our work. That's why we've been working hard to make sure you get the training and opportunities to connect with your members of Congress and to connect all of us to our own expertise and leadership so that together we can make a difference. On that note, we want to do the first of several quick polls we'll do throughout the next couple of days. We want to learn a little bit more about you. This is going to pop up on your screen, and all you have to do is choose an option. The poll is, why do you want to get involved in advocacy? To learn about policy, help my community, improve my life. That really helps us to know what brings each of us here. We are happy to accommodate all of those different reasons why you're here. We will learn about policy and help our communities, and we do aim to improve the lives of people living with limb loss. Now, I'd like to talk through what we hope to achieve through this forum together. Our goals for this forum are that you will learn how to engage in advocacy and make a difference all year long, to understand the policies affecting the limb loss and limb difference community, and to learn how to tell your story so that policymakers take to heart the issues important to you, like access to needed care and others. You will hear this a lot this week. You are the expert on living with limb loss and limb difference. Over the next few days, we want to help you bring your insight, your expertise, and personal experience to the legislative process so that we can make a difference. Thank you so much for being here. We're excited to get started. Now I'd like to turn to Dan Ignaszewski to tell us more about the leadership and influence we have as advocates.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. And thank you everybody for being with us here today in this virtual environment. I know it's not how we usually meet, but it's nice to see a lot of familiar names that have registered to attend today's sessions and then the rest of the sessions throughout this conference. While we can't be in person, I think that we have some really exciting things in store for everybody over the next few days. And we're going to start here today with how you can influence policy and how you can influence legislators moving forward. So the big question is what influence do we actually have as advocates? Especially in today's environment. How do we know if we've been influential? We have a lot of people who can provide their influence as advocates. And the truth is with senators and representatives listening really closely to what their constituents are saying, that's going to be the key to the impact that we can have when it comes to policy issues. Now, as we're going through this COVID-19 response and everything else, the truth is every office tracks how often they hear from you. They track how often they hear about certain topics and certain issues. So your voice really does matter. And it matters even more so during the COVID-19 crisis and the response. Many of the health challenges that have made people vulnerable to limb loss, diabetes, and vascular disease also make people more vulnerable to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we're learning more and more that COVID-19 may cause additional issues, things like blood clots, which could lead to limb loss or could lead to additional amputations or complications. So the truth is as advocates and as community members, you understand the importance of access to care. So understanding that and helping to communicate and educate legislators about some of those issues and some of those challenges is incredibly important during these times. Um, Another way that we measure influence is to track how many of you reach out to congressional offices. So in terms of you providing the influence, providing your experiences, that's really helpful for us to be able to know that the community is interacting with everyone during Limb Loss Awareness Month and making this a priority. But in terms of how we know if we're making a difference, we track that information as well. So we track how many people reach out to their members, and we track what kinds of responses people get. Another way that you can track is priorities and whether things are moving forward is whether or not new legislation is being introduced. So over the next few days, we're going to learn about some of those things and how to do some of this most effectively. But we do want to make sure that this is an engaging environment. In a virtual setting like this, it's important to keep everybody involved. So we want to keep hearing from you, and we'll be doing these throughout the sessions. But you should see another poll popping up on your screen, and we've got a couple of opportunities to kind of get a feel for how you see yourself in the community. So the big question we have is, do you see yourself as a leader in your community? Again, no wrong answers here, and it can be sometimes. What are your thoughts here? Okay, so it looks like 49% yes. And it looks like that's the leading response, and 44% sometimes. So it looks like a minimal number of no's, but I think that this is a really great way to understand what your role is and how you can be seen as a leader in your community. So this is a really great way for us to segue into our next presentation, and I want to welcome Matthew from Beekeeper Group to talk about getting attention with advocacy engagement and really leading as an advocate and what that means. And Matthew, I think we can kind of talk through the first couple slides and then we'll hand it over to you here. So please welcome Matt.
Carol, for having me here, and thank you all for letting me come into your homes today. It's a very unusual way of doing a training, but I'm very pleased to give this a shot. So we'll move over to our first slide. And we're going to be talking about getting attention with advocacy engagement. But as we transition over, I want to give you a sense of what we're going to talk a little bit about today. And then there's going to be a second part, which will happen tomorrow in the evening. So hopefully if you enjoy today, you'll come back and enjoy some more tomorrow. I'm not sure how we transition over those next slides. Are we able to? There, we're wonderful. Thank you. Part one, we're going to be leading as an advocate. So it was really interesting to see your survey responses, particularly the idea of doing it for your community, and also that at least half of you feel that you're already a leader. Hopefully by the end of this process, more of you will feel and understand how you're already showing leadership. And maybe if we have that poll again, we'll see if the numbers change. But in the first part of this section, we're going to talk about what kind of advocate leader are you? And then we're going to talk about it's amazing who you know. And I'll get into that, but that'll be a little bit more fun and also an opportunity for you to chat back and give us some responses. We'll then have a little bit of an interlude, and we'll follow up with a bit of a discussion about life on Capitol Hill and what that's really like. And then, of course, the value you bring to a member of Congress. And this is a really important concept that we're going to try and explain, but you all do provide extreme value to members of Congress and their staff. We'll go into the next slide and have a look at the different kinds of leaders that you already are. And Dan's going to jump in here because I'm fairly new to your program, but Dan's given me a lot of good information. So I'm going to kind of read through, it will be 4 different types of leadership, 4 different types of leaders. You may end up running across several of these. You might not fit into any of these yet, but we'll certainly try and help you become part of it as we go along. So the first is a support group leader. You're organizing and bringing groups of people together and are essential support for people in your community. Through these efforts, you can encourage your members to get involved. And Dan, do you want to talk a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah, I think, as a support group leader, you really are. You're a convener of people in the community. You're essential to folks who are seeking support, looking for community in these times. And we know that support groups are having challenges during these times. And not being able to meet in person and having some challenges in that space can be challenging. But a lot of our support group leaders are really elevating. What they're doing. There are a lot of Zoom meetings and other meetings and things like that people are doing virtually. It's really important that our support group leaders stay involved and stay really active as leaders. And as we kind of go through each of these, I'll ask you to populate the chat over on the right side of your screen. And if you are a support group leader, let us know. Just mention if you're a support group leader in the side of the chat here. That'll really help us to get a feel for everybody's role and how you fit in as a leader on the call.
Thanks, that's great. Let's move to our second type. This is a certified peer visitor. So you're meeting with people in your community and a match with other amputees to help them with their recovery and get them to be more aware of the organization, ways they can get information, and how to get involved. So this is something very specific. A lot of you who are certified peer visitors will understand what that is. Dan, do you want to talk a little bit how that might have an impact on the advocacy side?
Absolutely. Yeah. As certified peer visitors, you hear a lot of stories, a lot of individual experiences, and that can really help people be effective advocates, both for your own experience, being able to share your own story, but also, and similar to support group leaders, but also being able to help share other people's stories, being an advocate for others, being an advocate for the community. As a certified peer visitor, you have that connection to the community and an opportunity to be able to really engage with people out there that need support. Again, similar to support groups, this is a trying time. Hopefully, if you're a certified peer visitor, again, please let us know in the chat over on the right-hand side. But if you're a certified peer visitor, let us know, and hopefully you're using the Amputee Coalition's peer support app. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, make sure to do that as well. You can download both that app in both the Google Play Store and the iTunes Apple Store. So, it's important to stay involved as a certified peer visitor even during these times as well.
And Dan, we're going to lead into the next two we have here, which is our lead advocate and then a community leader. But I guess I have a question for you. Do people, do you find that the people who become lead advocates, and we'll explain a little bit more about what that is, are you recruiting them through the first two categories? Is that how you sort of identify people initially to become part of the lead advocate program?
Absolutely. Yeah, Matthew, that's a really great point. We've really identified that, the ways that we're going to be able to elevate advocacy efforts through the organization and as a community is through people who are already leaders in their community. And so with our support group leaders, our certified peer visitors, our support group attendees, even, there are a lot of folks that can get involved. And those are already natural positions that you are being a leader in the community. The lead advocate program is still relatively new, but we are really trying to recruit up leaders in the community that want to get more involved in advocacy efforts and really join the lead advocate program and be part of the policy making and policy supports to make sure that we're making a difference for the community. So that's definitely where we're already pulling from. We're not limiting it to that, but to folks who are already volunteering with us that way. But those are certainly areas that if you're already involved with the organization through a support group or through certified peer visitors or other capacities, those are definitely great ways and forays into the lead advocate program.
And just to go through the lead advocate program, and you've obviously got it on the slide in front of you, but this is a very specific program that the Amputee Coalition has. I think a little bit of the training that we're going to be doing today and in the next few days will mirror some of the types of learnings that you get as part of the program. There's community advocacy, including who we are, what's needed, and developing community connections and support. Policy advocacy, including Advocacy 101, policy priorities and issues impacting the community. And then media advocacy, including sharing your story, connecting it to issues and representing the organization's priorities and yourself in the community. Tomorrow, I'm going to have a pretty good discussion about sharing your story and different ways that you can do that. It doesn't just have to be one-on-one with the member of Congress or their staff. There's lots and lots of opportunities there. And then obviously with the policy priorities and the various issues, I know that's going to be a big discussion as we move forward. We'll go into the next category, the final one, which is community leader. And so you might be a member of a PTA, an HOA board, business leader, etc. You could be part of a sporting association, really anywhere that you're showing some sense of leadership to a group. It doesn't always have to be specific to advocacy. It doesn't have to be specific to the work you're doing, volunteering on behalf of the coalition or other groups. What establishes you as a leader is your willingness to take that next step. Probably what establishes you as a leader is your willingness to join in on this training. It's not an easy thing to do on a Sunday. And just becoming part of this is already putting you there. So hopefully, I know I'm waiting the results if we do the poll again, but hopefully this has sort of encouraged you to understand what leadership is and how easily you can become part of that. So let's move to the next section. It's amazing who you know. So this is something that's a little bit of an interesting concept, but your elected officials are there to represent you. They're probably from your local area, usually, which means they have strong ties in your local area. They're connected to you. They're probably connected to you in more ways than one. So here are some examples. And if we click on that slide again, I'll show you a range of different examples of where you could find connections. So it could be high school classmates, sports group, business associates, maybe the kids go to the same school. There's a whole range of different examples. Why is this important? Well, we're all trying to get to the attention of members of Congress and their staff. And you'll notice every time I say that, I don't just say members of Congress, I also say their staff. And I'll explain that a little bit later on, but it's really important. Those connections to both those groups of people are extremely valuable when you're trying to get your message heard and when you're trying to influence how they're going to support your community up on Capitol Hill or frankly, in any elected official in state and local, all across the country. If you can show that connection, and if you can go in and say, hey, we've not met, but our kids go to the same school, and maybe even have a little bit of a discussion about that first, not too long, and we'll explain why you need to keep focused on the messaging when you're in there, but just some way of having that connection. And it also doesn't have to be your local member. It's possible that you went to school with somebody or college with somebody who's now a member of Congress or maybe an elected official in another jurisdiction. Those are all really, really important connections. So we're going to throw up a little request here. Let's see if you can share your connections in the chat feature. So literally just, you can say, I'm connected to X member of Congress, or I'm connected to a senator, or however you want to put it, or an elected official. I don't think we're going to be able to show these responses, but I think it's going to be really helpful to just sort of get a better understanding of how many of you are connected with elected representatives, and also for you to think about that. So just take a minute or two, just really think about it. Any way that you know somebody, you don't have to like them. They don't even have to be your side of politics, but just someone that you've got some connection with. And while they're doing that, Dan, I mean, do you want to, have you had examples, when you've gone up to the Hill with people where you've seen that connection and really have sway and encourage member of Congress to pay more attention?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you never really know. And honestly, you mentioned that whether it's a member or their staff, it's really, really helpful to have those connections. We've had people who have had staff members who have been neighbors or live down the street, or share a vacation home somewhere, or go to the same grocery store, or their kids go to the same school. There are a lot of great connections between individuals in the community and the staff and the members. And, we've also seen, in addition to, some of those, one-on-one examples, we've had, individuals in the community that have run for elected offices and they've won. We've got, but at both the federal and the state levels, we have people who have, participated in campaigns. There are a lot of different ways that people have been getting involved and kind of, become aware of what members are doing in their districts and in their states. But I think that, it's important to understand, members can be your neighbors, they can be your doctors, they can be in your community in a variety of ways, and you may have some sort of tangential connection to them, if not a direct connection. And so it's really important to kind of think about and understand those things, because, frankly, you never know. And that when you do build that connection, it really helps to elevate the relationship that people can have with those members, and the ability for people to communicate back and forth about the issues and the challenges that we're trying to address with the policy issues.
So I'm not sure if there's a way for us to view this particular chat feature. So hopefully we've had some good responses in there, and if folks can see those, you can maybe spark some ideas for going forward in the future about the ways you can connect. And obviously, as you're getting involved in the next few days, but also the next few months, this is really something to think about, and you should communicate with the Amputee Coalition where you feel like you have these kind of connections. You may be surprised how much impact you're able to have.
Excellent.
Okay, I'll throw back to you guys for the next section.
Thank you so much for that presentation, and your conversation with Dan on these topics has really gotten the chat energized, and some good questions came in about learning how to be a CPV. So I've been sharing information and links in the chat so people can understand how to become a certified peer visitor. They can learn more about the advocacy program. Thank you. Your talk was really helpful. Now, you all have had some questions, so let me go ahead and go into the Q&A and pull those up, and we will have Matthew, Mary, and Dan join me on screen. If you have a question about what we've talked about so far, go ahead and type that in, and I will pose it to the group. The first question we have is from Michelle, and Michelle wants to know if we are considering doing virtual training. And I'm assuming, Michelle, you mean virtual training for certified peer visitors, since COVID-19 has eliminated the possibility of us doing in-person training. I'll let Dan and Mary talk about how we might be pivoting that to address where we are in this new normal.
Dan, why don't I jump in here for a second, and then I will turn it over to you for some more specifics. So from a global view at the Amputee Coalition, we are looking at our programs and our budgets to make sure that we are shifting to address the needs of the community in this new dynamic. So we are thinking across all platforms and across all programs to make sure that you are getting the help that you need. And the folks who are, during this critical time, there are folks who are going through amputation surgeries, and we're increasingly aware that there may be some complications related to COVID-19 that are causing amputations. So we are very aware of how we need to make sure that we are not asking you to come down the street to the local hospital for a training or to a local academic health center, but rather coming into your homes in methods like this. And so we're thinking that through across the entire universe of our programs and services. Why don't I hand it to Dan to talk a little bit about certified peer visitors?
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, the certified peer visitor trainings, as well as the lead advocate trainings, we are, it is an unprecedented time, and it is something that we've pivoted to prioritize virtual engagements and digital strategies with everybody. And we are in the process of building out and making sure that we are able to support those trainings in a virtual setting. We don't anticipate that this is going to be over tomorrow. And so we are preparing for this to be something that we can do in response to this, and to reflect the need, and to make sure that we are training people through our programs and making sure that they're able to get out and engage with other community members in a virtual setting. But in addition to that, we really believe that this is something that will be really valuable in the long run too. Transitioning, not eliminating, but transitioning things to a virtual format is going to be really helpful in helping us train more people, help people get more involved in different ways. And so we're in the process of putting together a couple of different platforms that will allow us to be able to conduct these trainings in person. A mix of both the it's like an e-learning modules and an e-learning platform that's sort of traditional online learning, webinars and web chats, and then, figuring out some different ways that we can conduct the trainings in a way that will allow for virtual engagement, but allow people to really get the information and supports that they need to be able to be trained and certified. And so we are investigating those things. You'll probably find out more about each of those programs, the Lead Advocate Program and the Certified Peer Visitor Program, in the near future as we continue to adapt and evolve those conversations.
That's great. That's exciting to know that all of our programs will at some point pivot online. Hopefully that'll provide even greater access to everyone out there who might not have been geographically close to a specific training location. We have a question for Matthew. Matthew, if we know someone who is an elected official or a staff member of theirs, is it okay if we talk to them when we see them out of the office? Are there right or wrong ways to do that?
I think I'd encourage you to talk to them, particularly if you're talking about yourself, your issues, some of the things that you've been trained on. Probably don't give them any kind of strange gifts. That might be about the only exception I'd say there. But just use common sense. And if you are concerned and you're not sure what you should say or what would be the most effective thing to say, please reach out to the team at the Amputee Coalition. That's what they're there for. But I'll talk a little bit about this tomorrow when we're doing storytelling, but your devices, your story, it's very interesting to a lot of members of Congress and staff, and they're going to want to learn about it and understand it. And so they're going to feel more comfortable doing that if they know you. And I think that's really important to remember.
That's great. Thank you. Kevin would like to know if you all can recommend any books about amputee rights, amputee access to care issues. Are there any books or educational tools that could be helpful for people to better understand their rights and responsibilities?
I mean, Dan, Kevin, thank you for the question, but I'm going to just say we have several really featured publications that we are just in the process of updating to make sure that folks have both the resources that they need right after amputation surgery, but also throughout the recovery and rehabilitation process. And then truly, it is a tool for us to use over and over again as we move through different aspects of living with limb loss. I have the pleasure of working with Dan and his team who have worked with our Scientific and Medical Advisory Council and some focus groups to make sure that those updates that are have just been finished are going to be really useful to everyone in our community through the National Limb Loss Resource Center in particular. Dan, why don't I hand it over to you for any other details?
Yeah, I think, we've got our first step guide, which is our guide to adapting to limb loss. And we cover a lot of issues and challenges in that guide that people experience on a regular basis in their recovery and readjustment. And we did just, the timing couldn't be better. We actually just finished it and it is, hitting the shelves now. And so for those of you that are interested, over the course of the next week or so, you should be able to get a new copy of the First Step Guide and our Your New Journey Guide, which were both updated simultaneously. And so those are a couple of guides that are free and available through our National Limb Loss Resource Center. In addition to that, one of the guides that hits on a lot of the policy issues, as well as some of the access issues that people face, is our Insurance Coverage and Reimbursement Guide. And that guide's also been available through the National Limb Loss Resource Center. It's a great guide. The subtitle of it happens to be How to Be Your Own Advocate, which is perfect for this setting and this engagement. But it really is. It talks through some of the challenges in accessing prosthetic care and other technologies. It talks through about some of the challenges experienced through insurance, how you can be an advocate for yourself, how you can use laws and other things like that to be able to help make your case when you're talking with your insurance companies. It tends to be focused more on the individual advocacy, but there are a lot of things that we can take from that guide that apply to both the individual advocacy as well as the community advocacy efforts that we're going to be talking about over these next few days.
And Carol, if I may, folks can find us. You have found us here online. You can find us at amputee-coalition.org to ask for these publications. We're happy to send them to you free of charge. Or during the weekdays, you can call us at our toll-free number, which is 888-267-5669. We have we've got a couple of staff members who are there to help you with publications or any other issues that may come up for you that you want to connect with our programs and services around.
We've got a great question from Marie Louis, who would like to know, how does this group distinguish community advocacy from paid lobbying strategies that engage grassroots advocacy at its core? Also, because most of the group is interested in policy, do you have a list or legislation watch of laws or pending legislation that would include policy making about amputations, limb loss, medical device coverage, etc.? So the first half of the question is, can you explain the difference between advocacy and lobbying? And then secondly, where can we find a list of all the issues that are related to our community that we can keep an eye on?
I'll just jump in and say the best way for your elected officials to represent us in a representative democracy is for an informed electorate to engage with them, to tell them what are the issues closest to you and how they can best represent you, whether it's in Congress or at your local school board level. They need to hear from you in order to be effective at representing us in our government at all levels. So information and education, that is incumbent upon all of us as citizens to do. And that is not what we would construe or what the Internal Revenue Service or anyone else would construe as being paid lobbying. And we do have to navigate those issues from time to time. Lobbying is when you ask a member of Congress to support specific legislation in order to influence their vote or their introduction of legislation. And we keep really close track of when we're doing lobbying versus advocacy. And so as we talk about advocacy over the next couple of days, we really mean that education and information sharing and providing expert level advice and detail to your members of Congress. We do have lobbying activities when we ask specifically for funding for the National Limb Loss Resource Center. That is a lobbying activity. And so we are also in the process of developing a policy agenda that is specific to people living with limb loss. Dan and his team have been looking at this, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in some of the sessions tomorrow. But having a full advocacy and lobbying agenda is our obligation as the organization that represents people living with limb loss. So we take that very seriously, which is part of why when we ask these poll questions or when we ask throughout the year, what is affecting you right now? What do you need? That feedback that you give us, we plug that straight into our policy agenda development process as well. And we have a number of things in the pipeline to look at. And we've also been engaging in congressional conversations related to COVID-19 relief. And we'll talk about that a little bit tomorrow too in the detail.
Dan, anything you want to add?
No, I think that actually hit it pretty well. I think that, the big focus is, and we'll get to this afternoon and again tomorrow. But I think that, helping people understand that you going out and engaging with members of Congress and their staff and talking with them, educating them about issues, that's advocacy. That's helping us make a difference and raise awareness about some of the issues and challenges that people are facing. And that's really what advocacy is all about. We as an organization can go in and make the requests, and you all can make the requests as well. But ultimately, it's those engagements and those stories that are really impactful to helping people advocate and be engaged with their members and with their community. I don't know, Matthew, do you have anything else you want to add to that?
The only thing I will say is right before the COVID crisis, I took my citizenship test and interview, thankfully passed it. But I remembered one of the key elements was your right to petition the government. And I think that's what you need to remember as advocates. You're not lobbyists when you're advocating on behalf of yourself and your community. You're really doing a fundamental right and it all gets a little bit confused. Politics is difficult right now, and trust in government and all of that stuff. We understand that it's challenging, but this is at its core what you're supposed to be doing. So please do get involved.
We've got one last question before we're going to take a short break. And David asks, for those without connections to people in elected office or their staff, what's a good way to get your foot in the door to speak with them?
I mean, I think we're doing it right here, right now, a little bit. Dan, why don't you speak to that?
Yeah, I think, engaging in this advocacy forum and making requests and having some initial conversations to open the door with members is vital to that process. There are folks that have come to our advocacy forums in the past and they didn't know anybody. And when they've come, they may have gone in the first year and they may have met with someone and they had that dialogue and went back and forth. And sometimes that's when they found out, oh, you happen to live 3 houses down from me. Hey, that's pretty cool. We now have that connection and we can build on that. Then when they come back on a yearly basis and they're engaging throughout the year, either through email or phone or coming to DC or meeting in the district offices, those are all great opportunities to be able to continue that engagement and build those relationships. So just because you don't come at it with a specific relationship right now, doesn't mean that those can't be developed. And one of the best ways to develop them is to do exactly what you're doing here, taking part in this. And we're going to have action items on the back end of these next few days. You take that action, you share your story within that action. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. And that's really what's going to help you to build some of those relationships. You're going to get the contact information from a staff member. You're going to get some of that feedback from your members of Congress. And that's where you can start to be able to build some of those relationships. And it's really important for us to be able to advocate and be effective policy, effective in policy. We have to have your stories and your experiences being shared with members.
Great. Matthew, anything you want to add?
I think Dan pretty much covered it. I agree. Just give it a shot. The meetings with members and staff, they'll tend to be quick. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that. They tend to be pretty quick, so it's not a huge burden. If you really don't feel comfortable yet, telling your story in front of a member of Congress, there's opportunities to write letters, there's opportunities to provide videos, there's all different kinds of ways that you can tell your story and still get that information out there, and we'll help you with some of that tomorrow.
Great. Thank you all for the great answers to these really, really smart, informed questions. And Dan and Matthew are right. By just you being part of this advocacy forum, you're expressing interest in learning how to build those relationships. And what we'll all be doing together on Tuesday by reaching out via email to our members of Congress is a really, really good first step. It's important to remember that they're human beings, their staff are human beings, just like we are. So to be able to make those connections through stories and email, you're on the right step in this direction. So I'm really grateful that all of you are with us here today. If you're anything like me, you might need a break. You might want to stretch, go get a drink of water. So we're going to take 10 minutes. We will see you back here at 2:00 Eastern Time. In the meantime, you might see a few poll questions pop up on your screen. Go ahead and answer those. We'll review the answers and tell you where you can find the answers when we come back from the break. So give yourself a little break from screen time, unless you want to keep chatting in the chat. I love seeing the conversations going on and the ways that you all are being so helpful with one another and making connections. It's really, really inspiring. It's fun to watch you all talk together. So meet us back here at 2:00 Eastern Time and answer these poll questions that are popping up. And we'll be talking about the kinds of things that influence your elected officials. So we'll see you in a minute or 10 minutes. Bye. Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed your break. Our Q&A lines flooded during the break, and we actually had a really good suggestion from someone in the audience who wants to remind everyone, and so do we, that it's really important that you complete your census forms. Here's why. The census is a really important tool for 2 reasons. Number one, it determines how many people are living where you live And that helps determine how many members go to the House of Representatives from your state. If the federal government sees a population surge in one area, they may want to divide that area and give you a new representative to the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. That's one important reason to complete the census. The second important reason to complete the census is that it allocates how much money the federal government sends to your state and your county for necessary programs that not only provide education and support, but really provide education and support programs for people living with limb loss and limb difference. It helps fund Medicaid. It also helps put money toward other supports and programs. So fill out your census. The details that you provide are confidential. No one but the Census Bureau sees them. And it is really important, again, to help determine how many members go from your state to Congress in Washington, D.C., as well as how much money your state and your specific county gets from the federal government for programs and supports. So, census, do it. Thank you for reminding us that we needed to talk about that. I really appreciate it. Let me quickly do a recap of the polls that you all answered while we were on the break. So the first question was, when was the last time you voted? 32% of you said the 2020 primaries this year. 24% of you said that the last time you voted was the 2018 midterms. 21% of you said that the last time you voted was the 2016 presidential election. And then 9% of you said, I can't remember. And that's okay. They all blend together, don't they, after a while? But we know there are really important elections coming up in November, whether at the federal, state, and local level. Being an engaged voter is really important. It's another way that you can be a great informed advocate. The second question that was posted was, what are the elections that you regularly vote in? And it looks like it's a pretty even split. So most all of you vote in the presidential, you vote in the congressional midterms, you participate in statewide elections, and you also participate in local town and city elections. And 3% of you thankfully answered the question that you do participate in American Idol voting. So thank you for that. Thank you for giving our nation's record labels some interesting new talent. And then 0% of you said that you've never voted. Bravo, we love you. I love that answer. The last question we asked over the break is, what do you think influences your elected officials the most? So 33% of you said that voters, constituents, you as individuals have the most influence with your elected officials. Then 29% of you said issue momentum. So that increased buzz and that increased visibility of issues is what influences your elected officials. 15% of you said money and campaign donations. 14% of you said personal stories have great influence. And 10% of you said that public recognition, the thanks, the admiration, the kudos from the public is what drives your elected officials the most. So those were all really great, fun answers. Thank you for that. So let's keep our day moving along and let's hear from Dan and Mary about what influences our elected officials. So we've established that each one of you in your own way is a community leader. And most importantly, you are an expert on living with limb loss and limb difference and what is that's like being part of our community. So what do you do with that information? What do you do with this sense of leadership and your knowledge about living this life? How do you get your voice heard over all the noise and all the competing issues? So Dan and Mary are going to talk about 5 ways that influence elected leaders. Mary, we'll kick it to you first.
Carol, and great information coming from the polls. That's really interesting to hear. So the first way is voters. If an elected official knows that your vote is decided by an issue, they will pay more attention to that issue. That's the first way.
Yeah, and the second way is your personal story. Never discount your personal story. It's really, really vital to helping share policy and make it real. The truth is, we all remember stories better than we do statistics, and your personal story and experience and sharing those of others that you know in the community can really help make issues that are impacting the limb loss and limb difference community more memorable, and really help in sort of making it real and bringing it to fruition in a way that sharing memos or sharing statistics and things like that just really never could.
And the third way is public recognition for serving their constituents. Every elected official is intending to deliver on results for their community. So when they deliver on promises, they appreciate that public recognition. So when we do things like letters to the editor to thank our members of Congress when they sponsor or support legislation that we care about, when you ask a question, when we go back to having town halls, when you ask a question in public saying that you appreciate the steps that your member of Congress may have taken on your behalf, that is the kind of public recognition that helps them attract other voters, and it is also how they get reelected.
Another way is issue momentum. And what does that mean? That really means, the more people that you can show support an issue, whether it's the House or the Senate, regardless, you need a majority of votes to pass legislation. And so one of the ways that you can build support for that is helping to educate more members about those issues, and then using that information once people have signed on and supported those initiatives, helping their colleagues understand these are the candidates or these are the elected officials that support this issue, and helping them, put some pressure on it in that way.
And the fifth way is money. Now, the coalition does not engage in this part of the political process, and money is not a part of the legislating process, but it is a part of the political process, and we want to be aware of the ecosystem of what influences our elected officials so that we can be effective. So fundamentally, leaders can't govern if they don't win elections, and money funds campaigns, and that helps them reach more voters, and that helps them win elections. So for many people in industries, if a candidate supports their issues, they support that candidate's campaign and their reelection.
Awesome. And now that we've kind of talked through and walked through each of these areas, it'd be really helpful to understand what engages our elected officials and really understand how we can talk through this in a little bit more detail. What is it like when we're engaging with members of Congress? And for that, we're going to bring Matthew back in from Beekeeper, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about how and where we can engage with elected officials and what that looks like moving forward. Matthew?
Thank you. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what life is like on Capitol Hill. So if we move to our first slide here, the next slide, I think this is kind of what everybody sort of assumes. It's sort of somewhere between House of Cards and Parks and Rec. It really couldn't be further from the truth. It's a nice Hollywood version of things. But if you move through to our next slide, I'll talk to you a little bit about what it's really more like. And it's really important to understand this, because when we're trying to communicate to policymakers and staff, we need to know what their culture is like, what their priorities are like. So some of the key points: no congressional office is alike. I like this analogy. I've heard it a number of times, of thinking of it as a family. Most of the offices are around 12 people. Most of them are working pretty late. It's definitely an emergency room style feel, 50 hours plus a week, round the clock. And unfortunately, the staff are not paid well. This means that anytime there's free food, they'll go for an event anytime that you're showing that you're cognizant that their time is valuable. You're not talking down to them. You're understanding that they've got lots and lots of priorities. So if they seem busy, it's not that they're not interested. These are all really important things to keep in mind. It's really, really important to understand how limited their time is. It can be really frustrating, particularly, it may be different for the next little bit while we do things virtually, but particularly when you've flown in for a Hill visit up here in DC, and you've gone through the training, you've gone onto the Hill, and you come into an office and there's people running around and there's buzzes going, and you might only get 10 minutes it really feels challenging because you've spent so much time to get there. But that 10 minutes is extremely valuable. We talked in the earlier session about the importance of staff as well. When we want to meet, we often want to meet with the member of Congress. We think for a range of reasons that it's more important and that they're going to listen to you. Actually, that's not always true. Often meeting with the right staff member who's got some of those connections, I'll talk a little bit about it later, but who's got an area of responsibility can be more important. So please do give them due deference. The Hill is kind of like high school is another concept, which is a really interesting way of seeing it. That's how they describe themselves too. So members of Congress are broken into groups like freshman, sophomore, etc. And they'll often find different niche issues to set themselves apart. I mean, there's a lot of them. They're trying to show leadership. They're trying to find something that's interesting. And if you can get your issue to become one of those, that's extremely important. And again, we'll talk a lot more about this when we talk about storytelling. A lot of you do have a really interesting story to tell, and you've got something to show. And there's a lot of groups that come up to the Hill and don't have that. And this is a really good way to be able to set yourselves apart and to be memorable to the Hill office. Look, the bottom line, and it's tough to say it, but this is how the system's supposed to work. Their main goal, particularly members of Congress, is to be re-elected and then to secure some kind of leadership role, climb the political ladder, get on a committee, etc. If you don't already know this, the House cycles every 2 years, so they're kind of constantly in campaign mode. Be wary of the time of year that you're communicating with them. That can have a real big impact on what's going on. Senate's every 6 years. It's a larger office. It means that there's more staff to be able to pay attention to some of the substantive issues. They're not constantly in that campaign mode, but at the same time, sometimes they can feel a little bit more distant. Let's go to the next slide, and I'll show you what Hill staffers kind of really look like. Although they're not usually this Photoshop, nice, but they're just sort of everyday people. I think you'd be surprised if we went to the next slide. I did a cute sort of example of a typical Hill staffer. So this is Sam Seaborn here, age 24. We talked about colleges and schools, education. This is obviously very fictional, but education at UVA. If you've got a connection there, if you're an alumna. Senior legislative assistant, has 13 different policy issues. I mean, you can imagine just sort of what his day would be like. Plays on the Congressional Softball League, constantly working happy hours. Happy hours are a big thing here in DC, so it's all part of what life is for a Hill staffer. And then he was a former Senate intern who grew up in the district. You'll find most of the staff probably have some connection to the district, certainly in-district staff, so the people who are in the home office are probably going to be from the local area, but even up on the Hill, there's a good chance that they've got a connection. And his primary goal is to get the member re-elected. That's not necessarily opposed to what you're trying to do. Your issue, your story may be a really great opportunity for them to take leadership and to advance what's going on. But go to our next slide. You'll see Hill staffers, as citizens, we kind of elect our representatives, but our representatives in turn kind of hire staff that they can lean on to be the experts on a range of policies. And that's what I was talking about before, where sometimes it's actually more helpful to meet with the staff member who really understands a particular policy area. They're the one who's going to have the ear of the member of Congress. The member of Congress, the senator, is going to come to them and say, hey, what's the position there? What's it looking like? What's the mood? What's the information that I need to pay attention to? So if you do get an opportunity to meet with the staffer, try and make sure you're meeting with someone who has at least some policy area experience related to what your ask is. But certainly don't be dissuaded if you do meet them. Hill staff will tell us regularly the number of times that they walk into a meeting. And remember, the average age of a Hill staffer is 31, and a lot of the junior staff are going to be 23, 24. And they tell us regularly they'll walk into a room with the constituent, and the constituent will just look downtrodden that it's not the member of Congress. And that's not the first impression you want to give when you're trying to encourage somebody to take up your issue. it is true. These are really the people who run Capitol Hill. If anyone's had a chance to work in our campaign or has worked at Capitol Hill, I know some of my fellow panelists are nodding their heads, but they're the gatekeepers. As I said, it's equally or more valuable sometimes the meeting. And then please, please don't forget the district office staff. Those staff members are often more personally connected with the member of Congress. They're in your local area. They've probably got a little bit more time when the Congress is in session. But when the member of Congress is back home, they are going to be extremely busy. So again, it's good to just time it out. If you're going to talk to those staff when the member's in DC, is a great time when the member's back home, and maybe back off a little bit. We'll move to our next slide. So there was a group of current and former Hill staffers who wrote a thing called the Indivisible Guide. I think it's still pretty readily available. I have a feeling it still gets updated. MOCs, which is members of Congress, want their constituents to think well of them, and they want good local press. They hate surprises, wasted time, and most of all, bad press that makes them look weak, unlikable, and vulnerable. So if we go to our next slide, these are some pro tips, if you like, ways for you to show value when you're in an office or when you're talking in the district. So understand you are competing with everybody. It really is. There's a lot going on. So you have to find a hook and really leverage your personal stories. We'll talk about it in the storytelling session tomorrow. Don't spend too much time on the personal stories. Try and get like an elevator pitch version of that so that you can get into the ask and you can get into the substantive policy issues that you need to be there. You're probably going to have 5 or 10 minutes. If you're in a group, which sometimes you'll go as a delegate group, you'll have even less time. So really think about that ahead of time, how you want to tell your story. Be truthful and balanced. Trust is a two-way street. If you tell them something that isn't accurate, it can really hurt the credibility, not just of you, but everybody else from your organization and who's representing your community, who's been up on the Hill. So please be truthful and balanced. Make the ask up front. And what that ask is going to be something that you'll be talking about probably over the next few days. And anytime you're going up there, and I know it was a question during the earlier Q&A, if you're not sure what the ask is, reach out to the team at the Amputee Coalition. They can tell you what it is. So it will be different at different times. Sometimes it's going to be something pretty difficult. Sometimes it might be a thank you just for supporting us, but make sure you get that in there. And as always, build and cultivate relationships, not just when you're meeting with them, but afterwards. It's a communication, hopefully a long-term relationship that will get you where you need. One meeting isn't going to do it, but it's a terrific start. If we go to the next slide, we'll show you kind of what not to do. Do not express disappointment if you can't meet with the member directly. I can't tell you that enough. Please be careful not to overshare on your personal story. We don't want you to forget about that personal story. It's very, very important, but sometimes you can get lost in that, and sometimes members of Congress will send you down that path because they don't always want to talk about the difficult ask that you might be about to make from them. So they'll really start to try and get you to talk about back home or local football team or something else. So try and stay on there, tell the story quickly, and then move quickly into the ask. Please do not get offended if your meeting is quick. It will be quick. That's just how it goes. But if you can be impactful, that's terrific. And then the Amputee Coalition team and lobbyists and everybody else can do the legwork afterwards. And then please, please do not forget to make that ask. I know I'm repeating it. We'll probably be repeating it lots of times as we go forward, but please do not forget. Thank you.
Awesome. And thank you, Matthew. Yeah, we It's really helpful information. And in today's environment, these asks and these things, we're not going up on the hill and meeting with members in person, but there's going to be a number of different ways that we're going to be able to engage over the next few days and over the next few months, frankly, as this situation plays out with COVID and with needing to be active virtually. There's going to be continuing opportunities to sort of evolve and figure out ways that we can continue to engage. And this is really the start of that. These next couple of days, but we're going to have opportunities to be able to talk through some of those asks tomorrow a little bit more in depth. We'll talk through the story elements, and we'll talk through, what does the engagement look like? What does it mean? And how do we really get involved and elevate some of the conversations and some of the topics that we want to do now? And frankly, how do we lay the groundwork for some of the things that we're going to want to do later in the year as we sort of navigate through these initial few weeks of uncertainty up on the hill around the COVID response. Again, thank you, Matthew. I really appreciate your help today. I do want to talk a little bit before we wrap up today about the Lead Advocate Program. We've mentioned it a couple times on the call. Hopefully, everybody's that's a lead advocate has already said something in the chat. If you haven't, please make sure to let us know in the chat that you're on as a lead and that you're a lead advocate, where you're from and everything. But what we really want to recognize the Lead Advocate Program as an opportunity for the community to get engaged. And we already talked about, we're going to be working to get this and our Certified Peer Visitor Program into some sort of virtual environment for the trainings. But our Lead Advocate Program was really evolved over the last couple of years as we realized that now, and honestly now even more than ever previously because of the COVID response, we really need people in the community to be able to help navigate and help us make a difference on policy issues and really be informed advocates. We need people to help represent the limb loss and the limb difference community. We need to really elevate you and your experiences so that we can be effective advocates for the community. So to fill this need, the Amputee Coalition created the Lead Advocate Program and works really closely with some of our partners, strategic partners, to engage advocates at a higher level. It really started as an idea of if we had a handful of really, really highly trained advocates in all 50 states, we'd have this great group of advocates that we could activate and respond on issues remotely or in person on an immediate basis. We can be proactive in our approach to Congress and really elevate the things that are happening in the states. The organization, we're a relatively small nonprofit organization that's continuing to grow, but we have an opportunity to be able to do more at the federal level and in the states if we have engaged advocates. And we can't be in all 50 states. We're a staff of between 20 and 30 or so people. But we really need advocates to be active and engaged. And so to fill that need and to help promote the efforts that we're trying to promote around access to care, around funding support, around research, there are going to be a lot of different ways that you can get involved. And that's why we created the Lead Advocate Program. So to understand the Lead Advocate Program, you can go to our website and find out a little bit more information about it. But basically, the Lead Advocate Program is designed to be a all-encompassing program that helps equip you with the information and skills that you need to be effective advocates and be successful, and help lead efforts in your states and help lead efforts and promote efforts that we're taking on at the federal level. The program explores all different types of advocacy, ranging from the local community involvement to federal and state issues, how you engage with the media, how you engage with peers. And that's our main focus. Is in order to be a lead advocate, you really need that all-encompassing approach. And so we really focus on that in the training. We really focus on the policy development. And Matthew mentioned it a little bit earlier. There is an Advocacy 101 course, so high school civics lessons coming back at you. But it's really important to understand that that this is an opportunity to be able to engage with the coalition and on policy issues that can help promote efforts and issues that affect the community. So if you're interested in getting more involved, whether you're a certified peer visitor or a support group leader, an advocate that's just joining this forum for the first time, or somebody who's been involved with the organization in other capacities, now's a great opportunity to be able to get involved and help drive change for the efforts in your state and at the federal level. And we hope that that was really helpful today to kind of walk through some of that. We've got a couple of great sessions to come in the next few days, but that's really important. And the Lead Advocate program is really central to our efforts in helping promote advocates now and in the future as we're navigating this crisis and elevating issues that impact the limb loss and limb difference community. So with that, I want to thank everybody, and I'm going to pass it, I think, back over to Carol to wrap us up.
We've thrown a lot of information at you this afternoon, and thank you so much for staying tuned in and staying engaged. I've been watching the chat go by as everyone's been talking, and we have almost 300 people here in the room today with us, which is phenomenal. I love that you all are getting to know one another. It's really wonderful to see how many different states are represented here and how many different types of limb loss and limb difference that you all have experienced and that you're living with. Again, if you just scroll through the chat, you're going to be able to see all different kinds of folks engaged with us today. It's been really wonderful to see. There are still some questions that I'm going to leave unanswered because we need to get a little bit more background information. But if you've asked a question and I haven't answered it yet, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. We also, Matthew, we have a question. What was the book that you said? It was a self-published book that members of Congress or Hill staff wrote. We had a couple questions of people wanting you to repeat that title of the book again. Could you do that for us?
So it is The Indivisible Guide, and apologies for my accent, so not invisible, but Indivisible Guide. It should be available online. It's freely available, a terrific tool. It was a number of staff. It's partisan, so apologies there. But it was a way for staff to be able to help advocates make change on a whole range of different issues. So it is a little partisan, but the information is still very good.
Thank you. You'll see a poll pop up on your screen. And the question that we're asking is a little summary of today. What has been the most valuable information so far that we've presented? Is it getting attention with advocacy engagement? Did you learn more about what influences your elected officials? What's been valuable in terms of informing your elected officials? And then also the Lead Advocate program. So if you'll click one of those and tell us what you thought was the most valuable piece of information that you learned about today, that'll help inform us so that we can learn how to even fine-tune what we're doing over the next 2 days that we'll be with you. A quick reminder before I turn it back over to Mary to wrap everything up. When you're looking in the tabs where you have the chat, the Q&A, there's also a tab for polls. So you can see the polls that we've thrown up today on the screen. You can see where those answers landed. And then you can also take a look at our handouts. We've got bios on all the speakers who are presenting over the next few days. We've got some information on demographics about limb loss and limb difference, and a whole other host of things that we'll be posting later today and over the next few days. So let me take it now and turn it over to Mary to wrap up today, and she'll tell you a little bit more about what's coming in tomorrow's sessions. And I hope we're going to see all of you back here tomorrow. So Mary, it's all you.
Thank you so much, Carol. And it's so good to see the conversation that's going on in the chats. Thank you, Dan and Matthew, for such tremendously helpful presentations today, and Carol for guiding us through what is, for most of us, myself included, new technology and a new way of engaging. I can't believe that we are done already with our first day of the virtual forum. I am a deep believer in grassroots advocacy. As a former Hill staffer and somebody who's been involved in patient advocacy for over 15 years, I am really excited to talk with you about what moves the needle with Congress, why it is so important to me to get experts like Matthew from Beekeeper to talk about advocacy. You will hear from other speakers on Monday and Tuesday that have a different set of background and skills that will be bringing those things to bear for us. And we will continue to build on what we learned today as the Advocacy Forum continues. Tomorrow afternoon at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So hopefully for folks on the West Coast, 10 a.m., you can come and hang out with us right after breakfast. We'll hear from some Capitol Hill experts about what it's like in Congress right now, what's happening with the COVID-19 legislation, and what we can expect in the coming months. And we'll also talk about what the Amputee Coalition is asking this year. Tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. Eastern time, and if I can do that, 2 p.m. on the West Coast. We will be speaking with Matthew again to talk about how to tell our personal stories as advocates and how to connect those stories with our policy requests. So I really hope that we will see you again tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. on the West Coast. And we really are pleased to have you here with us today. Thank you for taking this journey with us on the Virtual Advocacy Forum, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.